Peter, you're very welcome to the studio here today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join myself and Nick and to share your story with us.
Honestly, thanks Mel for having me, guys.
Not at all. Look, I suppose I'll go back to the first time that I met you, which was at the Talent Summit in Cork back in September. And when you stood on stage and you told your story, I have to say, I just found it so incredibly moving. You spoke about how you were diagnosed with a life-altering condition where you were diagnosed as being legally blind at the age of 20. And I just can't even imagine or begin to imagine what that must have been like for you. You spoke then, I suppose, about the struggles that you had with, alcohol and how you ended up in a treatment centre with those struggles. Peter, just talk to me a little bit about how you started to kind of rebuild your life from that point.
Yeah, so like I say, we ended up there. You have the 28 days of counselling. Like obviously there's a big road in between from diagnosis to getting there, but like bit by bit, I suppose I was struggling with the delivery of being given a condition. It was physically degenerating right in front of me. So I had 14 months of eyesight getting worse, and I was definitely going down the avoidance coping road. You don't end up in a treatment centre, I suppose, for no reason. But really, like I say, it was in there. I always say it was, while it was the scariest thing at the time, I was only 22, it was this most profound and phenomenal experience that I could have at that age, because like I actually did commit to it. While I went in reluctantly and a little bit dragging the heels and like psychologically not knowing, am I a fit for here? I kind of connected with both counsellors and people inside there, and it's hard to half-ass something like that. Like it's too emotive. There's too much going on between family days, between people you meet, all the cocktail that goes into a month's experience in there. And like I say, I know I've said it to you before, but I connected really well with my counsellor, and he kind of put this whole proposition to me that is like, I hadn't tried to be visually impaired ever. I had given the last 3 years essentially in denial. I was pushing people away and doing it in kind of a somewhat socially acceptable way. I was just like not talking about it, pushing people away. A young Irish man putting up all the fronts and pretending I was a lot better than I was. And meanwhile, like my headspace was pretty chaotic. Like I didn't know what the path forward looked like. Didn't have a crazy amount of role models, but I suppose I kind of landed. It was actually, maybe I haven't said it before as well, but like I kind of had a real good little hook. I remember got that question thrown at me that you haven't tried to be visually impaired, but I actually made another little commit to myself as well, where I had a little niece at the time. I still have a little niece. I have loads of them now at this stage, but like I was 22 and my sister had her quite young. She lived with us. It was like, I remember kind of telling myself, it's like, do you know what? Don't want Maeve to have an alcoholic uncle. Okay. I kind of like, motivation comes from different places sometimes. It's like, it was one part for me, one part for other people. And I kind of just landed on that little rationale, and I left there with a huge sense of excitement. It's like, do you know what? It's like, why not try? Because I hadn't, and just see what'll happen. And there was no eurekas, but we kind of pushed on. And
is that where the whole journey kind of started, I suppose, into, you say, one thing you said there was, I'm just going to try. So in that, was that where the kind of the sporting element came back into it? Because I know you speak about hurling being a huge passion for you kind of before you were given the diagnosis, and team sports. And then obviously your transition into kind of starting to cycle.
Yeah, like I left there 12 years ago now. Like, so I've done some pretty cool things in the intervening period.
Just a few.
But there was no grand plan. Like I honestly, when you're in that low ebb, like it's a pretty low bar that kind of looks like success. And I like wanted to be content. I wanted to be happy. I didn't want to be as scared. It was all like very basic human needs. Like it wasn't I want to go to Rio. It wasn't like Irish teams. It was like, I want to get back smiling. I want to get back, not feeling like this. And there's a kind of saying in the AA community that I came across before. It was like, you hit rock bottom when you stop digging.
Yeah.
And I just like, and there was more for me to lose. Like there was people in there probably with worse scenarios, and we spoke about before around the relativity of problems, but my life was as low as I wanted it or needed it to get to. And it was time to start making some changes. And change the things I could change essentially and figure out the rest. But it was just about getting that momentum back is kind of what I'm trying to say here, because like I was in a bit of a spiral and rock bottom and all those phrases, but it was like, what's the next thing that can just bring a bit more joy? And sport, as you mentioned, that was part of the old me and one of the strongest traits I had. And through counselling and a lot of other conversations, I needed to get that back. I was 22 and it wasn't terminal. Was kind of the big eureka moment in my head. Anyway,
I mean, I have to say, Peter, things I took from your story, and like it's fascinating for me from where you came from and obviously what you did achieve. And I'm trying to relate it to myself and indeed some of the listeners, that we all go through struggles. You know, we're speaking off camera about some of the challenges that we face in our lives. I mentioned obviously in terms of having children, struggles I've had, you know, even with teenage children and making sure they're making the right decisions, hoping that they find the right path, you know, achieving success in whatever success looks like for them, whether it's being, you know, playing a sport or, you know, getting to university or doing a job that just occupies their mind. Because we talk a lot about mental health. And even taking that further, you know, listen to, I mean, you were nominated, I think it was Tipperary Man of the Year in 2019, which is incredibly impressive given that I think that was the final year that Tipperary won the All-Ireland. How did that feel for you, I suppose, at the time? I know you said that it wasn't really something you thought a lot about, but just even taking that along the journey.
Yeah, I kind of reflect on some of those bits kind of now. Like when you're in that kind of, in some ways I'm still trying to use the sporting mindset that I have. And while it's one of the best things I've ever been kind of gifted with is like being involved in sport, like it does lend itself sometimes to the next thing. And I don't know, like I would probably have a lot of business owners or entrepreneurs here, and like it is sometimes it's like, right, we get to that goal and I need to work on that myself as well, as like stop, smell a little, enjoy what we've just achieved, because sometimes it turns into, well, what else can I do? And because that's the momentum that actually got me out of the hole, was like, right, what's the next thing, and building on the layers and the layers of trying to be a better human, happier human, all that kind of stuff. But like when I look back now, like 2019 to win that award, and it makes me think specifically about the project that we pulled off. And like it does, like say, I can find a lot of joy and solace in it and the people that gravitate towards that project, because I don't think it was like I won that award, but it was for this phenomenally cool project where we helped a few people, but like made connections that are kind of going to be there for life. So it's I think that's kind of the win in some of these things.
And for people not familiar with it, Peter, that was it was a cycle around Ireland, is that right? That
yeah, so
mostly contributed to that.
Yeah,
And how much did you raise overall?
We raised 92,000, and like it was kind of born out of our inception. It was myself and Sean Assey, the guy I was cycling with on the Irish team at the time. Started off very innocently. We knew this event was happening, 2,250 kilometres as quick as you can. Essentially, it had to be done under 132 hours or you're kicked out of the race. And it had never been finished by anyone with a disability. So we're like, this is all very cool. Let's do this. It was going to be team bonding. It was like, it was end of season. It was fall. And then I actually met the organizer and he was telling me about the extremes of the race and what it'll do to you and all this kind of stuff. And I was kind of like, do you know what? I'm missing a trick here if I just do it for Peter. And to the point that I was so scared about the event, it's like, I don't know, am I a good enough reason to get through this? Like I don't, when it comes to like whys and hooks and anything, when you're going into that scary place, it's like it's really important to have this fundamental, why are we doing it? So ultimately, I suppose we turned it into a fundraiser, but it was for two families that are living pretty nearby my local area, and parents had become full-time carers. There was 3 sick kids in the mix, and like I say, it just kind of snowballed in the momentum and started off wanting to raise 50,000, and even like parents and people at home were like, you are a madman, what are you, like how, because I was very open and I put it out there front and center. It's like, I'm trying to raise 50,000. Like say we ended up raising 92, but like I didn't claim to raise it. Like people joined the party, and I think sometimes in life people just want to join a good news story. There's enough bad things happen out there, and you give them a reason to latch their...
Can I ask, were there any, like you kind of brush over what I can imagine were real challenges of just the actual event itself and how you did that. you talk about, and what I've seemed to have got a sense from you from is that you've seemed to have had this kind of, I suppose, overburning kind of desire to achieve something for maybe someone else.
I was just going to say that, like, you set your sight on something and you just go for it because you have incredible like resilience, and it's like you said earlier there that target of 50,000, and people were looking at you saying you're a madman, but you far exceeded that. So you have obviously huge drive and huge passion.
And it's like, and I'm kind of at the other side of maybe the harder times. I suppose the top of that question was around doing it for someone else. And it's like that fundamentally, I get to feed my own selfishness by doing these like, out there goals, because like that's where I'm getting the buzz. Is like, this is lofty. There's not too many gonna try and create this. There's not a template for it, I think. And that's kind of much of the life I ended up creating for myself. It's like I didn't know blind people. I didn't know what I'm supposed to do. There wasn't this like perfect, okay, they go to UL and they study this, because it's like, no, I was stripping it all back. It's like, I don't know how to use a laptop. I'm blind. I kind of had to retrain at everything. So I'm okay with not going down conventional roads and trying to figure out, well, where am I going to get the buzz? And sometimes the buzz comes from the crazy things. But I'm enjoying it nevertheless.
So the crazy things started obviously on your kind of Paralympic journey, which was to Tokyo, Rio. You are a 4-time national champion, which is just phenomenal. So cycling became obviously your passion for, I suppose, a decade really as such, while you pursued that career. Talk to me about like the financial challenges that you faced as an athlete, because it must have been really hard. I mean, cycling is not a cheap sport. I mean,
yeah. You can be sure of it. And like you throw in, I was obviously visually impaired cyclist, so I was on a tandem. So there's 2 of us. So essentially we're just after Dublin. Whatever it was to get to the Olympics is now twice that.
Yeah.
Now, obviously the Irish system will find you the pilot, but like, so when I started off, the first guy I was racing with was based in Mullingar. I had a guy that was in Dundalk. I've had a guy in Dublin. And then I suppose a more tenured guy from Carrick-on-Shore and Tip, which you say, yeah, great, they live in the same county, but that's the bones of an hour's drive down to Carrick for a man that doesn't drive. And I always say the paradox of like, 1, I don't drive, and 2, I need a van, not a car, because I have a tandem. So it's like a long wheelbase kind of thing to get it around. So logistics, there's this whole kit and caboodle, but like you throw in trying to get to a games, people, and it's a good time for the chat because we're all just off the back of Paris and we've seen the success there. But it's like, generally it's going to take minimum 4 years to try and get to a games. You have full-time commitments around training camps, the competition structure. On a busy year, I could have been abroad 16 weeks a year.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
One thing as well, you don't let obstacles stop you anyway. That's one thing that's sure and certain, because there is a lot of obstacles in trying to kind of manage that kind of a schedule and logistical obstacles as well.
See, it doesn't lend itself to a 9 to 5. This can be the bit as well, or like you're not being, look, the Irish system is great in so many ways, and we've like all the NGBs and the structures are there. We've 3 tiers of payment. You have 12, 20 and 40. The actual problem being like, how do you get into the system? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because you have to go from being young Peter, 22, getting into the sport with potential to trying to bridge that gap so for me to go to my first World Championships, I got invited to a training camp, but it was out in Mallorca. And because I wasn't officially part of the squad, it's like you kind of have to make your own way there. And I don't say that in any criticism. That's just like the way it is. Everyone has a budget. They can only work within certain parameters. So I had to figure out like my local community, there was like, so I talk about fundraisers now, but people helped me get to, where I got to. Like there was cycles, there was walking weekends, there was stuff like that. And it was like people were backing me left, right and centre to try and get that. Now since then, obviously I kind of...
They backed the right horse anyway.
Like I say, I always say like the community I came from picked me up in so many ways when we were down. But then obviously like there's a guilt attached to that. It's like it's hard to feel like a professional athlete if your funding is coming from like help and support and call it charity for all intents and purposes. So like I wanted to professionalise that, and I kind of fell into the speaking circuit in some ways, and that just became, 1, I was loving doing it, but 2, like it was a great networking tool. It was paying for some of my, like, okay, this will pay for that trip. And I was kind of, everything was being figured out, reverse engineer my year. It's like, right, I have 7 trips. If I get 5 talks and and potentially I found sponsors through that kind of stuff as well. And that's the life of an athlete. It can be cap in hand and figuring out season by season or training camp by training camp. It's like, right, because you're always comparing to, oh, the Brits are doing this or the Dutch are doing that. And it's like, how can I get to that standard? So it's obviously sadly,
and a lot of tennis players talk about this. I just read Conor Nyland's book over the summer, and like a lot of the struggle was around the kind of financial kind of journey, because there is so much, if you're not at the top, I mean, winning, and you're paying for flights here, there, and it's expensive. But talk to us a little bit about your kind of transition then from obviously being a full-time athlete into the whole HR space where you are now, and how that happened, because that must have been a hard transition for you as well.
It was. It's like you retire twice as an athlete, don't you? Or so like I was 30, it was COVID. I was like, when Tokyo got kicked down the road in under 12 months, I was like, right, I'm bowing out here. But like I hadn't, again, you're so single-minded in a lot of other ways. Like as an athlete, you're not thinking what next phase looks like. And I would have thought I was rounded, and I thought because I was doing a few keynote talks that, I know business pretty well. It's like I knew nothing. And I didn't know like because we always talk about, actually as an athlete, you talk about training age or whatever, but like my corporate age was non-existent. Like I kind of realized I went from being like top 5 in the world of what I do to, and you operate as a solo athlete, you kind of operate like Mr. CEO. Like I was kind of building the team around me. I got to figure out who my physios are, who my this is, what routine works. I was the decision maker. I wasn't segueing across. My first role was actually I went over to HubSpot. Okay. So I was working in sales there, but like the filter was like not super educated, but I like targets. I'm pretty goal orientated. Definitely. I'm okay with people. And it was true advice. I met a mate of mine who was kind of bouncing ideas off me, and he worked in Glassdoor, so he was in that tech world anyway. But he was like, your transferable skills would work really well in sales. So that's kind of how I figured it out. It's
really interesting, because we were talking off camera about some of the relatables to particular audience. As business owners ourselves, we've gone through a journey. Our company is now 11 years old, and we had struggles at the very start from a point of view of even thinking, was this going to work as not just even a career, but to become a business that, now hires over 11 people, and continuously just thinking about the development and the struggles that we face. And even though they're completely different, a lot of business owners are going through cost of living rises, wage increases. We've got this advent of auto-enrollment this year with, pension provisions for all staff. And it's one thing after the other, and it's just dealing with that kind of change and constantly being able to adapt, which is obviously something you've had to do. And I say this, in terms of even myself as a business owner, how have I adapted? What am I trying to achieve? And even not staying still and trying to get onto that next phase and transition, because, it is a case of, doing the best. And like you've obviously continuously tried to kind of think ahead and develop yourself as it is, and it's been kind of almost multifaceted. Obviously you've got the business speaking to your own kind of career as well in HR, which must be challenging in its own way.
It's funny. I kind of want to stay learning. It's something I only kind of latched on lately as well, because like what got me at that line of like, what got you here won't get you there. Yeah. It's like, unless I'm tacking on new skills, and like there was, like I'm happy in the sense that I'm naturally curious. So like I say, I went into sales, now I'm in HR, I'm in recruitment. It's like, one, I'm kind of like learning, well, like this is like me doing my degree. Like I'm kind of figuring out, how does a business operate? I'm always asking questions. It's like, what works, what didn't work. We're doing a lot of M&A stuff. It's like, I'm just absorbing all this kind of information. I'm like, wow, I didn't know any of this. And you talk cultural integrations, you talk like tech IT integrations, Workday, all that kind of stuff. So it's like, I'm enjoying it, but like I say, I'm still trying to figure out like, where am I going with this, or what am I doing with it? But it's, like I say, once you're kind of contented and you're challenged and all that kind of things, but I'm not sure whether like my 40, 50 hours a week has to be the thing that I'm all in on, or it's the stuff around it, be it the charity work, be it the different things. It's like, I want to have layers and I like spinning different plates. But for the time being, like say, there's some professional goals there that I definitely want to take for the next few years, and then before I whip out what the next crazy project will be. But yeah, there's a lot going on.
And in terms of wellness then, because I suppose that's the event, it was a wellness event that I met you at. Like how do you think, or how best do you think that employers can, you know, bring that kind of wellness into their own kind of working environment? I mean, what can employers do to help employees in the whole kind of wellness space?
Yeah, it's a huge topic now at the moment.
Yeah.
And we talk about culture in the company and stuff like that. And it's like, there's people listening here that have a 5-person company, or it could be a 5,000. And it's like how, like, that can really be just manager by manager.
Yeah.
Dictates a culture. Like, you could have a company known for a phenomenal best place to work, but like you work under a tyrant, the company is a tyrant. Do you know that kind of way? So
well, they
it's
say
like,
people leave people, they don't leave companies.
and I'm fundamentally all in on that statement as well. But like you say, I do think things trickle down from the top, and most of the time people are passing on their pressures. But you go into work, I'm just a big believer in like the rounder human being, like, because we used to believe in this in sport as well. Like if I had a bad day's training, it wasn't always because of training. It's like, what are you bringing to that day?
Totally, yeah.
So it's
and
like,
you never know what's going on in somebody's life, or maybe, you know, what struggle they've had that week at home, or, you know, with their family, or whatever that may be.
100%. People want to create the boundary lines, and that's all fine. But like, I suppose I'm probably of the opinion, I've seen the benefits of being open. I've seen the benefits of kind of making myself a bit vulnerable and talking out some of these things and creating that culture where it's like, we're not always trying to project the perfectionist, or we're not always, but sometimes I think like within a team, they need to see that at managerial level.
Okay, yeah.
Like the manager doesn't always have to have all the answer. Do you know what I mean? It's like, can you create that environment where it's like you lean on your soldiers, because like, well, that's what they're there for. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so I think as soon as, so it's a ripple effect. I think vulnerability, it's a hard thing to tell someone to do, but you almost need to see it enacted in others. And it's like, okay, this is the sort of place where we can say that. And you know, maybe that's off-site days, and you get to kind of get to know people as humans, like, as opposed to, there's nothing as sad as, I think, like going on a work night out or whatever, and all you can talk about is work.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, we have to have a little bit, the best teams I was ever on in a sporting sense. It's like, yeah, we have this fundamental goal that we're working towards and pouring our souls into. But you need to know what's going on, and because then you can actually read the ticks before they actually happen. And it's like, okay, right, he's a little bit down. Because if you don't know the mood, what's the baseline mood for this human? So I think, like, it all happens. It's man management creates, like, people buy into goals for different reasons. Like me and Sean were on a tandem trying to get to Rio. We had different whys why we want to get to Rio, but ultimately you can have the same goal but a different, like, why you're doing this. Some people it's to pay the bill. Someone it's to, do you know what I mean?
And you talk about kind of what kind of comes up in my head there is community. Like you said, your community at home, or what supported you. And I suppose when you're at work, you have a similar thing. It's like your community is your work colleagues, and because we spend so much time at work, that it has to be it's better if it is a nice place to work, and, you know, a nice environment, because I think spirit and community spirit is what brings people together, lifts people, and ultimately kind of creates a nice place.
Like I said, I don't want to be too kumbaya. It's like anything from 37 and a half hours to 50 hours a week with these people. It's like, why can't you get on? You're spending more time with them than
your family.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So it's like at a minimum, it's like no one should have to be, oh my God, I don't want to go in today. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I actually, sometimes I probably, like, companies want to run me, but I'm like, if that's where you're at, like, really spend some time at looking at why. You know what I mean? It's like, there's loads of roles out there. Like, maybe it is the wrong role. Maybe it's the wrong fit for you. Maybe it's this and maybe it's that. But it's like, don't just meander through life. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, give of yourself whatever you're doing. So, yeah.
And you spoke a lot about, like, you know, the earlier struggles, and I just want to get to a happier place. You know, you got married last year.
I did, yeah.
And obviously you seem extremely, you know, content. You're exceptional at what you do in the whole kind of, well, I suppose, firstly, sporting, you've achieved things that most people kind of can't even, like, the 5 days, so 3 marathons a day over 5 days is just, I actually can't even get my head around it. So you've had such kind of sporting achievements, you've had, personal achievements. What's next for Peter Ryan?
I have to be careful how, like I say, I'm locked into a contract now since last year with my good wife, so I have to be careful about what I say and when I say it. But it'd be a terror if she found out some of what's going on in my head through a podcast. But like ultimately, I did so those 2 ultra endurance events, be it cycling and the running ones. Like honestly, you talk about like the buzz of life and this, that, and the other. It's like I got to scratch so many different itches there, whether it was my own like selfish pursuits as well as the bit of give back. I kind of found I'm opening up conversations about advocacy, about DEI, about whether it's resilience, and if I can kind of turn the dial on some of those conversations without being preachy, but more educating. Like I say, I always go back to, we didn't know anyone that was blind. We didn't know anyone with a disability. And all these words were actually taboo in my head, not to mind the fear and angst that my parents, family, all those, they had, because they didn't know how can Peter have a normal life.
Yeah.
I didn't know how I can have a normal life. But I'm kind of slowly but surely, we're starting to etch out, for all intents and purposes, a very abnormal, normal life.
Yeah, is anybody's life normal though?
Yeah, exactly.
And I had this conversation at the side of a rugby pitch with a mum the other day, and she said, like, what's normal? Like, we all have, like, we're a blended family, which is now probably a new norm, but like we were kind of talking about just what is normal. Everyone's life is just so coloured and so different, and so and everyone faces like struggles in different ways, and I don't think there's any family out there that doesn't have a struggle, but everyone's struggle is probably different.
I would say like the Paralympics was such a learning for me on that. Like whereas I went in there because of sport, and she just started seeing life and around her sense, and kind of exactly to your point, like there's something coming in every house in the country. So like, well, the more nuanced piece of my life might be about disability. It's like if I can zoom it out to being about, do you know what, acceptance. We all have something going on.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out. Let's not judge the lad beside you, because if I was in his shoes, if I grew up in that state, what would I be like? Do you know what I mean? It's like we all have, there's a different set of circumstances going into all of us. But so the moral of the story, I want to do some cool goals around that ultra endurance space, and maybe spark some nice chats around the way.
Very good.
Very good.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, for your time today. It's actually been incredible chatting to you. Your journey is outstanding. And I just wish you every success this year and beyond.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks very much, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank
On
you.
tip.
Thanks.